How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today is November 27th, one day before Thanksgiving, and you're watching this as a pre-recorded episode because of Thanksgiving, so I did this one in advance, and there's also not going to be any shows on Friday and on Thursday for this week until we ultimately come back on Monday. So that is the piece of news that I wanted to get out before we get into what we're going to talk about in today's episode on Thanksgiving. There's a couple good games on, so we're going to preview both of those. The Bears taking on the Lions, and later on the Packers also facing off against the Miami Dolphins. And also, during the rest of this show, we're just going to look ahead to Week 13. There's a ton of great games that we have in store, so we're basically just going to talk about them the entire show and just dissect it, analyze them, and give our picks as well. But before we get to all of that, I have to remind you guys, if you guys wanted to get involved in any of the live shows that you do see on here, please don't hesitate to do so. If you guys have any questions, comments, or any opinions you'd like to share, please, your input and insight is a big part of what makes this show great. So don't hesitate to do that. And if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that just by using the Super Chat feature. You can use the Super Chat feature by clicking the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. In this way, it guarantees that I see it, and then I could read it on air and just get your guys' thoughts on anything I say or on any of the topics that we do discuss on here. So again, let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. Again, get involved with the show. Use the Super Chat feature. Click the $ at the bottom of the chat box, and let us know what you guys are thinking. So with that in mind now, looking ahead to tomorrow's slate of games, not all of them, because I only really wanted to focus on the ones that I thought were going to be most competitive, starting off with the NFC North matchup, the Chicago Bears taking on the Detroit Lions. As Chicago travels to Detroit this time around, it is their first time facing off against each other in 2024, and I think by far just the first thing I thought was that this was going to be Caleb Williams' toughest game so far in his rookie year, because not only is he a rookie, obviously, but with everything that's gone on with Chicago, they've lost their last 5 games, and even though, that is the matter of fact, their offense is now under the command of Thomas Brown after Shane Waldron was let go. Thomas Brown stepped in, and he's done a pretty decent job with the offense and Caleb Williams. So despite the wins and losses, mostly losses, they've played a lot better over the last 2 games. And not only that, Caleb's looked a lot better. And that's the biggest thing. Like I kept saying it when we talk about the Bears. The biggest thing about them is not whether or not they lose a lot more games than they win. It's how Caleb looks and projecting towards the future, and how you could eventually start focusing on winning games, but not really right now. With how bad it looked initially, to improve that situation is what they should be focusing on going forward. But that is what Chicago's been dealing with. While on the other hand, Detroit's the end goal, right? Detroit is what everybody wants to look like, or I assume what most teams want to look like, right? Because they continue to just handle opponents each and every week. They allowed 6 points last week to the Colts, and then 6 points the week before that to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not the toughest of opponents, but still very impressive over the last 2 weeks. They have the top scoring offense in the NFL, averaging around 32, 33 points per game. And when you just read both of those 2 things that I just said on the Bears losing their last 5 games and on the Detroit Lions, just destroying everybody, this game, you might be wondering, why did I pick it to discuss it, right? Well, I had no idea about the next thing that I'm going to read, but I thought it was super interesting because, we're talking about Thanksgiving, and usually you do see the same teams on there, right? Like the Lions and the Cowboys, and usually like the Packers or something like that, right? Well, the Lions, especially in this matchup, on Thanksgiving, all those variables in play, they have not been the most successful when all those things, are active, right? Last year, this matchup, just in general, was pretty interesting between the Bears and the Lions. Obviously, the Bears have changed a lot about them, but last year, just with these two teams in this matchup, just based on the NFC, Chicago won one of those games. They won in Chicago 28-13, but also when they played in Detroit, the Bears were actually winning by 12 points before the Lions came back and won 31-26. So they split the season series last year, and now they're playing one of their games on Thanksgiving. And I think that is something to point out because, like I mentioned, right, when all those variables are in play, the Bears playing the Lions tough last year, and also on Thanksgiving, Detroit has not shown this dominant, play style or these dominant results very often on Thanksgiving, right? Because Detroit has lost its last 7 games on Thanksgiving, and 3 of them have been to the Chicago Bears in this 7-game losing streak. The last time they played on Thanksgiving against Chicago was back in 2021, so very different, but the Bears won regardless, 16-14. Tomorrow is going to be the 85th time there's going to be a Thanksgiving game in Detroit, and in that timeline, the Lions are 37-45-2 on Thanksgiving, a losing record by a pretty decent margin, right? Things have not gone well for all those Lions fans that go there hoping to see their team win and then, go back and enjoy like a nice meal on Thanksgiving. It hasn't really turned out that way in all of their time on Thanksgiving. While Chicago on Thanksgiving, on the other hand, they've played 38 games and they have a record of 20-15-2. So, I mean, you look at both teams right now, one's 10-1 and the other one's like 4-7. So you can kind of see where the favoritism is shown, right? I'm pretty sure the Lions are like 10-point favorites going into tomorrow, but I don't know. I always feel like things like this always play their part. For whatever reason, it always seems to turn out like this, right? Or at least favor one side when you get like random facts like this on Thanksgiving, or the fact that Lamar Jackson's only lost to one NFC team in general, and that was the Giants, led by Daniel Jones, or again, another Lamar stat on Monday Night Football. He's like 7-2 or 8-2 or things like that. Mike Tomlin is another one on Thursdays in the division on Thursday Night Football on the road. I think he's still winless or something like that. All these things seem ridiculous, but I think just in my mind, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, always kind of play a part in the results for whatever reason. But looking at Chicago a little bit more, we talked about this 5-game losing streak a little bit, and the last 2 games have been very disheartening. And, I'm not even a fan or anything like that, but watching them lose to the Packers on that blocked game-winning field goal is one thing, right? That's already painful enough. But then last week, you see the game against Minnesota, you fight your way back, you get into overtime, and unfortunately, this one was just a bit more common, I guess, because they had their opportunity to win, but Minnesota's defense stopped them, and all they had to do was go down and kick a game-winning field goal. Still tough, right, because you came all the way back, but the first one was very painful, but even still, they're competing at least, and that's something that I thought they would do anyway this year, but of course it looked really bad during a stretch of time, right, with the Commanders game and the Arizona Cardinals game and things like that. Over the last 2 games, even though they lost, you do feel like Caleb's, kind of turned a corner, and he's made a lot of impressive throws. They're getting the ball out of his hands quickly, and every time he does scramble, it always feels like it's not just aimless, right? It feels like there's always a purpose with it, which is, development. It's growth there, because before he was just taking too many sacks and just killing drives on his own, and now it looks a little bit more thought out, at least. So that's always a good thing. And their defense is good enough. Their defense has kept them in a lot of these games. Unfortunately, they couldn't come through last week against the Vikings, but it's growing steps, it's development, right? They're going to go through these tough times, and just overall on the road, Chicago is yet to win a game on the road so far, so that doesn't really bode well. While the Lions have only one loss, and it happened to come at home against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that's kind of where it stands right now with Chicago. And on the other side, looking at Detroit, things that we haven't already talked about before, the team is good, obviously, but they're still not just like cruising through this season like they don't have anything to play for, right? It might all look perfect, but Philadelphia is only one game behind them, and they don't play each other in the regular season, unfortunately. But if they happen to drop a game, or for whatever reason on Thanksgiving they lose tomorrow, that's probably even with the Philadelphia Eagles unless they lose, right? We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but Philadelphia could even up the score there in terms of record and try and get one over here on Detroit if they are careless going into this game. So, that's something else that it's just not like a walk in the park, right, throughout the rest of the season. They still have a lot to play for and shouldn't take it for granted. So, with that being said, who do I think is going to win? Chicago are 10-point underdogs, and all these weird facts and, information about the game do make me, pause a little bit and kind of think about everything. But I think it's too much of a disparity between the two teams. Maybe if Chicago had just rattled off two of those wins against the Packers and the Vikings after they fired Shane Waldron, I would be all in and be ready to have Chicago go into Detroit and upset the Lions. But I think it's still going to, if anything, it's going to be close. But I think the Lions should win this game. I believe they're going to win this game. And, all those games before, a lot of the time came when Detroit was really bad. And I think this is arguably one of their best teams that they've had in a very long time. So it feels like they're focused. It feels like they're, just the way Dan Campbell operates everything, it feels like they know the importance of every single game. And they don't take it for granted, much like maybe last year where they were taking the lead over the 49ers for granted. And, they had that rough loss in the NFC Championship game, and that probably stuck with them, I would imagine, throughout the entirety of then until now. So I'm going to go with the Lions. They're definitely good enough to win, and I think they're going to win by at least like 10 points or a score or something like that. I think the Bears will keep it close, but ultimately the Lions will win. But that's not the only Thanksgiving game I wanted to talk about. I wanted to mention the other one, the night game that we have between the Dolphins and the Green Bay Packers. A lot of playoff implications here for the Miami Dolphins, a game that they must win, not only to keep pace in the playoffs, but for something else that we're going to get to right after our first break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast to continue to talk about the slate of games that we have on tomorrow. Only this other one, because we're not going to really mention and go too deep into the Giants and Cowboys game for obvious reasons. So I think the game that everyone expects to be the closest or be the most competitive is the one with the Dolphins taking on the Green Bay Packers, right? The game will be played in Green Bay as Miami travel a very long time over there to the frozen tundra over there up north in Green Bay to face the Packers. Miami enters this game on a 3-game winning streak, and they're coming for a playoff spot, right? They're getting closer and pushing up on the Denver Broncos for that last spot. Maybe the Chargers too, depending on, how the rest of their games go, but I fully expect them, the Ravens, and the Steelers to take up the last spots, right? Houston's going to win their division. The Chiefs are obviously going to win theirs, and Buffalo's obviously going to win theirs. So it's really the last spot that I think the the Broncos are really fighting off everybody else to keep that spot. But the Dolphins, I think, are the most threatening one at 5-6, and they're sitting at 8th place right now, right up there against the Denver Broncos. And since Tua's come back, they've looked a lot more explosive, a lot more just convincing, and just on the way that they play, it feels like there's something different. I don't know why. They're getting the ball out of Tua's hands a lot quicker, and it all just seems more efficient. Like, if you don't keep up with them, they're going to run away with the game pretty quickly. And, that's what the Miami Dolphins have kind of showed me over this last, little win streak that they've been on. Whereas the Packers, they're coming off a big win themselves. They just defeated the 49ers 38-10 to avenge their playoff loss to them last year. And also, Green Bay's won 6 of their last 7 games. They have an 8-3 record right now, and they currently sit as the 6th seed in the playoffs right now, one spot below the Minnesota Vikings at 9-2. And the Lions sit in first place in the NFC overall, right? 3 NFC North teams are competing to be in the playoffs. I probably think all of them are going to make it at this point. I don't think any of them are going to crash out at this point in time. But the Packers are trying to move up and get to that 5th seed. They're only 1 game behind the Minnesota Vikings, and that's a big difference from, well, actually, I was going to say it's a big difference from playing the 3 and the 4 seed, but the Seahawks and who's in the 4 spot? The Falcons. They're both kind of about the same thing, I would project them to be. They don't really, compared to the Eagles and compared to the Lions, obviously, those two are a lot more similar within themselves than the other two, right? I think that's fair to say. So, I mean, the playoff seedings are always important, but the Packers are still playing for that as of right now. So, the last time these two teams have actually played against each other was back in 2022. Green Bay won 26-20 down there in Miami, but it wasn't Jordan Love playing. It was back when Aaron Rodgers was still the quarterback. So they still have that, obviously. They've played relatively in close time here, but I talked about the playoff implications and things like that. Miami trying to stay close to Denver, right? There's a couple more games that they're going to have favoritism in, and they're going to have more of an advantage in. But I think this game matters a lot for Miami because of one of the facts and one of the main issues with this that the Dolphins have faced recently is the fact that everyone talks about them in cold weather, how it just doesn't work. Miami in cold weather in the playoffs, or once we just get closer to November, December months, and they have to travel to Buffalo or New York or any of these other places, Green Bay now. It's almost like a sign, like, oh, like they're just gonna lose. They're playing in below 40-degree weather. It's a given that they're gonna lose, and they've really tried to shake that narrative, and I think they have a good opportunity to do it now against the Green Bay Packers, right? And they've been playing pretty well. Credit Miami for this late surge because they were 2-4 when Tua went down, and they were last in scoring at that time, and if not for 2 very close games against the Bills and the Arizona Cardinals, 2 games that they had chances to win both of those games, they could be 5-0 right now since Tua came back from his injury. And I don't think that's just by coincidence or just by not playing anybody, right? They lost to the Cardinals, who are playing pretty decently. Obviously, the Bills, they played them a lot closer, and the Bills are one of the best teams in the NFL. So they've had these moments where they're right there with some of the best teams. It's not like they've just played some cupcake schedule since Tua's come back. They've been playing pretty decently. And this whole narrative around the cold weather, they have a chance to kind of quiet a lot of that noise down with a game in Green Bay, right? It's never easy to go play over there, much less when the Packers are actually very good, and they have been very good in recent memory. So having an opportunity to go play there and try and steal one, I don't think it's impossible to do, and it just adds a little bit more to the incentive for the Miami Dolphins to go out there and put their best foot forward, right? But elsewhere on the Miami Dolphins, the injuries, there's not too many to talk about except Tyreek Hill, kind of, just because he missed yesterday's practice because of personal reasons, so I don't know what his status is up until right now or when the time you guys are watching this. So that is something to watch. I assume everything's good, but you never know, especially with personal reasons. So that is something to keep an eye on from, the injury or the availability of some of these players. But in terms of injuries, they're not really missing too much, and that's really what they're dealing with right now. And for the Packers on the other side, they've been dominating too. I mentioned they've won 6 of their last 7 games, but really the main criticism has been the turnovers or the decision making by Jordan Love in particular. I think he's thrown an interception each and every game he's played, except last week against the 49ers was the first time he hadn't thrown one. So you might be saying, what's the big deal? They're still winning games. It doesn't really matter. Well, I would argue it does matter in the bigger picture, just when you're talking about the regular season as opposed to, the playoffs, right? Where a mistake or a couple of mistakes like he's made sometimes are the difference in these close games. You don't want to leave it up to chance, right? There's already enough troubles and things you have to go through in the playoffs. The last thing you want to do is pile on top of that by your own doing. So I think that's something that they like to shake off right now. And last week was a good sign. They played a very efficient game, but mostly because I think they really prioritized the running game, and I think that they have to do that more rather than having Jordan Love throw like 35, 30 or 40 times or something like that, and run that risk. That decision making has to improve. I know there was that injury and everything like that, so you do cut him a bit of slack. You do lean on the side of his projection and the promise that he showed last year. So it's not like he's a major glaring problem, but it is something that you take away with each and every time they play, and also just something to look out for as well. The Miami defense, it has been playing better. So that is something that I think a lot of people also don't talk about with the Dolphins and how good their offense has been, yes, but also their defense and the job that Anthony Weaver has been doing with them has been pretty significant. So that is something else to keep in mind here when the Packers are facing off against this defense, right? They gave the Rams a lot of trouble and the other teams that they've played during this win streak. So in that sort of area, in that sort of realm there that we just talked about with the defense, we'll get into the matchups to keep an eye on in this game that I think will make a huge difference overall. Starting with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, because Jalen Waddle had a big game last week. Those two guys facing off against Green Bay's secondary. And I don't know if Jair Alexander is going to play. He's been questionable and kind of in and out of practice and in and out of the games over, the last few weeks. So he's a bit of a question mark right now. They'd sure need him to play against, this level of wide receiver. But don't forget about Xavier McKinney. Xavier McKinney has been patrolling, the deep part of the field and just keeping everything in front of him for this Green Bay Packers defense. And that's a huge thing to do, especially when you got 2 of the fastest wide receivers in the NFL. And playing both of them at the same time is something that I'm sure that they have circled on their drawing board, and something that they truly are paying attention to, obviously, right? Having Xavier McKinney kind of being the hub or the passage back there in the backfield to try and limit the amount of times Tyreek and Waddle try and get behind them. And what better guy to do it, right? Xavier McKinney, I believe right now, is still tied with Kirby Joseph for the lead in interceptions, and he's done a fantastic job for them. I think he doesn't get talked about enough. Honestly, people keep trying to throw it down the middle of the field or anywhere near him, and he makes them pay every single time. That's something that Tua and this Dolphins team have to watch out for if they're going to win this game. I'm not saying don't take any deep shots, but really make sure that they're on point, because more often than not, Xavier McKinney's all over it. So that's one of the matchups. The other one is on the offensive side of the ball for both of these teams. Really Josh Jacobs and Devon Achane, who can be a bit more successful running the ball. Obviously, we saw how successful the Packers were last week and how efficient they were when Josh Jacobs was involved, when he was, getting a lot of the touches, when also he scored the 3 touchdowns, and it just made it easier for that offense to flow in my opinion. So they have that, and then you have Devon Achane also, who gets involved in the running game. Not only that, but gets involved, in the passing game as well. They move him around a lot, much like they do with a lot of their pieces. So both running backs are going to be a huge piece to this puzzle to see where the offenses go. Whichever team runs the ball better and, which one of these guys gets more involved overall, I think is going to have more success in this game, on the offensive side of the ball especially. So we go to that, and then the last matchup I have on here is Jordan Love and Tua. Two quarterbacks that obviously the quarterback is the most important spot, but these two guys in particular are going to be a huge difference in this game. Tua, has been playing great over, the last few weeks, like we said, but, there are those games against the Buffalo Bills where, the first matchup, I say, where he threw multiple interceptions and it quickly, just quickly got away from them, right? And from that point on, the timing and the rhythm was just thrown off from that point on, and that's huge for the Miami Dolphins. So because of that, you have that on one side that they have to watch out for, but also for Jordan Love, we just talked about the turnovers and things like that. So that could force you to get behind the chains, behind the rhythm and everything of your own offense. So that is something that both of them have to watch out for, and whichever one takes care of the ball a lot better, is more efficient with it, is going to have a big say in who wins this game. But overall, I am going to go with Miami. I think Miami proves their point. They're going to go into Green Bay, not just any old, cold place, Green Bay, with how well they're playing and how well they played at home especially. They're going to prove a point, and I think prove a lot of people wrong and go in there and finally win a game in cold weather. I think Love and the turnover problems is something to watch out for, just because this defense for the Miami Dolphins is very underrated. They get after the quarterbacks. They were all over Drake May last week, and then also Matthew Stafford as well. So I like their defense. I like their matchups as well. And they get after the quarterback, like I said. Chop Robinson has been a guy in that rookie class that has kind of had a late surge, and he's playing very well as well. So the turnover battle is still going to be huge. If Miami can stay on top of that and their defense is getting after Jordan Love, I'm going to go with a little bit of an upset here. I think Miami gets it done and really, make a name for themselves in this playoff push here for the latter half of 2024. So those are all the Thanksgiving games I'm going to talk about. I am going to mention the Giants and Cowboys game a little bit later in the show, but right now we're going to look ahead to Sunday, and I had to highlight this matchup between the Eagles and the Baltimore Ravens. A dream matchup, stars all over the place. Who's going to win this game? We're going to give our predictions and everything that you need to know about this game when we return after this break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Jumping back now into the Chip Shot Football Podcast here. We talked about the games tomorrow on Thursday, obviously with Thanksgiving. Now we're going to look ahead all the way to Sunday now and look at this dream matchup that we have on here between the Eagles and the Baltimore Ravens. Two teams that are playing some of the best football in the NFL as of right now. And, we're talking about two of the best offenses in the NFL as well. And one of the most anticipated games, I think, this year. I honestly didn't even know that they were playing already. But then when I looked at the schedule, I had to talk about it because this matchup is one of the best that we're going to see probably all this year. Philadelphia will visit Baltimore this upcoming Sunday, trying to extend their winning streak to 8 games as they come into this game at 9-2, while Baltimore just got back to winning ways after last week's win, or I should say this week's win, where we are right now on Monday Night Football against the Chargers. They now sit at 8-4, trying to keep up with the Steelers there for the AFC North, putting a lot more pressure on the Steelers to win their game against the Cincinnati Bengals. So that's kind of like the stipulations, what everyone's playing for at this point in time. But, Philadelphia have been one of the hottest teams in the NFL, if not, the hottest, right up there with Detroit. They sit at the number 2 spot right now in the playoffs with hopes of catching Detroit. We talked about it before. It's not something the Lions can just take as a given already that they've locked up the number 1 seed. With the way the Eagles are playing, I don't really see them losing maybe more than a game, honestly, the way that they're playing and the way that their offense is kind of humming right now, especially, we haven't even mentioned Saquon, right, and what he's doing. So all of that is something that they are still playing for. I'm sure they believe that they could get that number 1 seed if they continue doing what they're doing. While Baltimore right now, in terms of playoffs, they're sitting at the 5 seed right now, and they're not going to, they could go higher at the number 3 spot, depending on who wins that division. And like I said, keeping pressure on the Steelers is something that they're truly pushing for here. With another matchup later on coming up against the Steelers, they definitely feel that they could win that division, and having a home game in the playoffs is obviously huge and a lot different than being on the road for the entirety of it. So that's what they're also playing for. A lot is riding on this game for both teams, right? To keep pace with the Steelers or with the Lions in that regard, but also, just keeping things going, continue to improve. And going up against a team like this is always like a litmus test, right? It's always like proving yourself against teams. I titled this, Super Bowl preview, because both of these teams could very well end up there. So I think it's, by that standpoint and by that, margin, is super important, if anything, other than, the records and the playoffs and things like that. So that's also what, there is on the line. We have 2 of the most talented teams just in general as well. 2 of the most stacked rosters in the NFL outside of Detroit, right? You have both of these teams. You have Jalen Hurts, you have Lamar Jackson, you have Derrick Henry, you have Saquon Barkley on the other side. 2 great defensive lines, 2 teams with talent at the wide receiver spot, or just receivers in general. Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, Deontay Johnson just coming in there, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith on the other side, and I haven't even mentioned the defensive stars for the Eagles as well and how well they're playing. So every position you go through, everywhere you look, the Eagles' offensive line, they never get talked about, but there's stars everywhere, and that just attracts more eyes. It's going to make the game even more when you have truly the best of the best playing against each other and kind of responding to one another during the game. I am really hyping it up because I think it's going to be an awesome matchup to watch. And something else too to watch is, like I mentioned before, and all those kind of weird facts that we talked about, kind of like in relation to Detroit and Thanksgiving, Lamar Jackson, again, has only lost to one NFC team in his career, and that was to Daniel Jones and the New York Giants. He's won every other game against an NFC opponent up until this point. And, that's kind of on the line, right, with the Eagles and how well they're playing. Can they put another blemish on that record as well? It's something about Lamar in the NFC. He doesn't really lose to those teams, so forget about being in the Super Bowl, right? If he ever gets there, they're probably going to win based on this record. But besides that, and, kind of getting too far in advance of ourselves, looking at the Eagles a little bit closer heading into this game, it hasn't all been great for them because their longtime veteran, the last kind of member of that core group of players that they had with Fletcher Cox, Kelsey, and Brandon Graham, he unfortunately is going to be out for the remainder of 2024 because he suffered a tricep injury that will require surgery. So he is going to miss the rest of this year, including the playoffs and everything like that. In terms of injuries also, Devontae Smith missed the last game that they had against the Rams, but even still, I feel like he's going to play in this game. I haven't seen too many injury updates, but it feels like he should be good to go in this matchup. So that's something to keep an eye on. But also, Darius Slay did not finish the game against the Rams either because he was dealing with a concussion. So we'll see how the Eagles monitor that as we go along. A very sensitive injury, obviously, when you're talking about the head and the brain and everything like that. So that is some of the injuries that they're dealing with. But regardless of all of that, they're showing how good they can be with all of this talent. Even when a couple guys go down like this, it doesn't really change the outlook on the Eagles really whatsoever. Darius Slay more so than Brandon Graham, obviously, because of the significance that they bring to the team. But overall, you talk about this team and how deep it is in a lot of spots, right? You look at corner, you look at Darius Slay, Quinyon Mitchell playing great, Cooper DeJean, Reed Blankenship's having a great year, CJ Gardner-Johnson, excuse me. They're all playing very well, and they're everywhere, honestly, with how much depth they have. The offensive line and how healthy, too, they stay pretty much the entire year is a credit to them and just how well they've built up this team, right? Credit to Howie Roseman. But, what they do with this talent, there was some rough points in this year where the offense might not have looked well. The defense was missing a bunch of tackles and just really wasn't going after the quarterback. But that's also a credit to Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, the two coordinators that they brought in, how great they have this team playing now and how they got them through that rough start, and now they're one of the best teams in the NFL. So that's one thing. And also another thing that they've become, kind of known for, especially in that last game against the Rams, the amount of explosive plays that they have each and every game, it seems like, right? It always seems like they break out one big run or a huge pass by Jalen Hurts to A.J. Brown or something like that. It always feels like they have something like that. And with that in mind, they lead the NFL in that regard. So something to watch out for, something where in a moment you feel like the Eagles aren't really doing much, but then just like that, they have a big play like that and it sparks everything. So that's what you get when you're dealing with all this talent on one team. And then just not that far off, you have the Baltimore Ravens, right? In terms of injuries, they missed Roquan Smith missed last game with a hamstring injury, and I'm assuming he's going to be good to go. He's listed as questionable, but you never really know with the hamstring injuries and how also sensitive they are when you're talking about the hamstring and soft tissue like that. So I'm assuming he's going to be out there. I don't think it's going to be that bad, but again, he's listed as questionable. And the biggest thing with them, I think, is always going to be the amount of times they use Derrick Henry. I think it's something like if they give him 20 carries or like 22 carries or more, they always win a game, and that's been a problem, right? You go back to the AFC Championship game last year without Derrick Henry, but then against the Steelers a couple weeks ago, the fact that they didn't use him more was always something that people are going to go to. So how much they continue to rely on Derrick in this game and using him relentlessly to kind of counter Saquon Barkley is going to be interesting to watch. But much like the Eagles, and we talked about them, all it takes is one big run for Derrick Henry to start kind of chugging and get into a flow state of sorts and really look unstoppable. So they also have their own firepower to fire back at the Eagles. But in terms of, we just mentioned Derrick Henry and Saquon, that's one of the matchups that I think is definitely going to decide this game. You have two MVP candidates, in my opinion, at the running back position, and really playing a big role in their offenses are squaring off against each other. They're both leading right now the NFL in rushing yards, and probably they're up there in scrimmage yards as well, I'd imagine. So these two guys are playing some of the best football in all of the NFL, quarterbacks included. So they're right up there in the MVP competition, and overall, it's going to be a matter of who makes more plays, who impacts the team a lot more, that is going to resolve this game. And then from the running backs, you go to the quarterbacks, right? Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, very similar in terms of the running ability, the great accuracy and arms that they bring. How are they deployed? Who has to throw the ball a lot more, based on the other team's opposing defense, right? And, the turnover battle is always going to be huge. The decision making is also another one. Both of these quarterbacks are everything for their team, so they're going to be in the spotlight of pretty much the entire game. So again, they're going to impact the game as well. And then you have the Eagles wide receivers, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, going up against the Ravens' questionable passing defense, right? They have been playing better. They did play the Chargers, who don't offer that much firepower. Same thing with the Steelers, but they didn't win that game. So this is arguably the best duo they're going to play at that wide receiver spot. It's close with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, but I would still opt for A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So this is definitely their biggest test, and how well can they shut, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith out is going to be a huge factor. But with that in mind, I think I'm feeling more confident about the Eagles. I'm feeling more confident that they are going to give Lamar Jackson his second loss against an NFC opponent in his career. And it's mainly because of the duo that they're going to be facing, right? Because you have to put a lot of attention on them, right? If you imagine A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith get going, right? Then you start to overcompensate and bring more attention to them. Well, then that means there's less people in the box for Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts as well. So it's really such a tough conundrum to be in when you're dealing with that, especially when just individually man-on-man, the Baltimore Ravens passing defense has not been great overall, so you got to bring help, and then you're weak somewhere else. So because of that, I think it's going to be too much to overwhelm that Ravens defense, especially if Roquan Smith doesn't play, then I think they're going to be in trouble. But one thing that I have to mention here before we move on is the fascinating idea that the Ravens clearly play better when they're in a lead, right? They keep Derrick Henry more involved. They keep running the ball with him, as opposed when they're down and they try to pass their way back into the game more often than not. We saw it against the Chiefs. We saw it against the Steelers, right? And it feels a little bit off in that regard. They don't use Derrick Henry. I'm fascinated to see how the Eagles deal with that, right? Knowing that the Eagles usually start these games slow and the first quarter is definitely not their best quarter. If they let the Ravens get out in front of them, how do the Ravens deal with that? Do they just dominate the game from that point on with Derrick Henry? Or maybe the Eagles get out in front and kind of break that trend and force the Ravens to pass a lot more? I think that's going to be such a fascinating sort of chess match here. And even if the Ravens do go out in front, the fourth quarter and giving up big leads has not been something that, and giving up big leads is something that has been attached to them. They give up the most fourth quarter touchdowns in the NFL to this point. So, even if they do have that lead, we talked about with the explosive plays and everything like that, how it just takes one play and the Eagles are all over you at one point. So that is something I'm definitely, keeping an eye on to see how this game develops and how the Eagles or the Ravens kind of make adjustments to that. So that is going to be probably hopefully it's not a case where we overhype it and it's just like 20 to 14 or something. But I'm really confident that this game is going to be awesome on Sunday. I can't wait to watch it. But on the topic of Sunday, we're going to get to the game picks. We're going to get to predicting all the games on Sunday. We split it up into two parts because we're not going to be on the rest of the week. So the last two segments, we're going to go through each and every game and talk about who we think is going to win. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are back on the Chip Shot Football Podcast here. The last two segments, like I mentioned before the break, are going to be just looking ahead to Sunday. We usually split it up into two parts anyway, but we do it on Thursdays and Fridays. But that is not going to be the case this week because of Thanksgiving. So we split it up into two segments here to end this week's show. So without further ado, looking at the first part of the game slate on Sunday, starting off in the left-hand corner, we have a couple games here that have trickled down from Thanksgiving and Black Friday, so I just threw them in here as well. The last Thanksgiving game is going to be the Giants against the Dallas Cowboys. This Thanksgiving game is going to be at 4:30. It's not the night game. Obviously, that went to the Dolphins and the Packers. So this game's kind of sandwiched in between the two that we already talked about. And with everybody missing, it's probably the least anticipated game heading into this weekend. We have Tommy DeVito probably against Cooper Rush, or Drew Lock against Cooper Rush, depending on if Tommy DeVito plays. He's dealing with some sort of forearm soreness, so that is something to keep an eye on. But, it doesn't bring a lot of energy or a lot of excitement that much compared to the other games. So still, it's a significant match for, I assume, the Cowboys more so than the Giants. The Giants are in a rough spot right now with the comments post-game and, just everything just not looking great overall for them as an organization. They got embarrassed last week at home against Tampa Bay. And on the other hand, Dallas, on the other side of things, they just defeated the Commanders in their game. So they're feeling good about themselves. They're coming into this game with a lot of confidence, I'm sure. So you have that part about it. And funny enough, I kind of realized this as I was preparing for this. These are the only teams in the NFL that have not won at home yet. Neither team has won in their stadium all throughout this year. And now the Cowboys have as good of an opportunity to do it against the New York Giants, but I'm not going to pick them. I'm going to go with the Giants, probably one of the only times I will, because this game, anything you think you know about this game, I feel like can kind of get thrown out the window. Both of these two teams are just in a weird spot right now where you don't know what's going to happen. Just last week, it was complete pandemonium in the Cowboys and Commanders game. So I have no reasoning with this game. And I feel like the Giants can get a win here despite all the comments, the bad sentiment in that locker room and in the organization. I'm just going to go with the Giants. I feel like it would be the most Giants and Cowboys thing to happen in this year. So I'm going to go with the Giants here for one of the last games on Thanksgiving. Then we move down just another day and we look at the Raiders and the Kansas City Chiefs. This game is going to be on Black Friday, this upcoming Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So a weird kickoff time here usually, but in this game, it looks like it's going to be Aiden O'Connell starting, and I mentioned that because not only did Gardner Minshew get hurt, obviously, but also Aiden O'Connell was the starting quarterback last year on Christmas Day when the Raiders went into Kansas City and defeated the Chiefs in Kansas City on Christmas. Now they play about a month in advance on Black Friday, and it is something a little bit interesting. The Raiders have been here before, and arguably it's a much more shakier team in Kansas City, and it feels wrong saying that, right, because they have a better record. But that there's all that conversation about the close games and the Chiefs not blowing anybody out. The Raiders, along with the Panthers too, I think you would put them in the same conversation of the amount of threat that they pose. So the Chiefs should be winning this game by a comfortable margin, but after last week, you don't really know, especially with the Raiders already doing it last year and defeating the Chiefs, around this time. Why couldn't they go in there? I'm sure nobody picked the Panthers to only lose by 3 points, but is it concerning? I talked about this before, and I didn't think it was overly concerning. I think it could be close. I wouldn't be surprised if it is, but I'm still going to go with the Chiefs despite all of that, and the Raiders probably thinking that they have a great chance. They're fine in thinking so, but I think in these close games and everything like that, I'm still going to roll with the Chiefs. The Raiders, there's a lot of things going on there on the football field that just don't look great. So they also have, I think last year too, they had a great push and a great, contribution from their running game, where this year, I believe they are last in that category. So the Chiefs have enough, definitely talent-wise, and I think just running the ball. Isaiah Pacheco could return in this game as well, so that would be a huge boost to them as well. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs overall. They win a close game, they blow them out, it doesn't really matter. All they care about is winning, and I think they're going to win another game here. Then we look at the Steelers and the Cincinnati Bengals, an AFC North matchup. It's the first time they're playing against each other this year, with all of the Steelers' divisional games kind of jammed here in the second part of the year. Cincinnati comes into this game as 2.5-point favorites, but have only won one game at home so far. This one's obviously going to be in Cincinnati. They're 1-4 in Cincinnati, as opposed to 3-3 when they travel to play their games. So that's a bit interesting there. But heading into this game, Pittsburgh got humbled about about a week ago now, in Cleveland, where you had the snowstorm and they just kind of got beat up against the Cleveland Browns. They had a chance to win that game, but still, it doesn't take away from the fact that they lost to a 2-8 team at the time. And Cincinnati, on the other hand, is coming off of their bye week, so they've had some time off, but also the Steelers have had, their little mini bye with playing on Thursday. So both teams I expect to be well rested, obviously, and it's one of the toughest tests for the Steelers, no doubt, with Joe Burrow playing at an MVP level, Jamar Chase kind of flirting with the Triple Crown and everything like that. It's going to be one of the toughest tests for that Pittsburgh defense. And I think last week they just felt tired and beat up with dealing with Derrick Henry all game and everything like that. So I expect their defense to be in a lot better shape to face a challenge like the Cincinnati Bengals. And it'll also be a test for the Bengals defense as well, right? Nobody really talks about them for how poor that they've played really the entire year. But, can they slow the Steelers down? Can they limit them to no touchdowns and really give their offense a great chance to win this game? Can the Steelers score touchdowns is going to be another question, right? That their red zone efficiency has been a huge question mark. And in this game, it's really going to come down to that, I believe. You're going to have to keep up with the Cincinnati Bengals, because the only team that's kept the Bengals under 20 points has been the Eagles defense, and that was a couple weeks ago. So are the Steelers capable of doing that? Probably, but I'm not so sure it's something you could just bet on right away to think the Steelers are going to hold them to like 18 points. So the Steelers are going to have to put up points to help their defense and help themselves out. And with that in mind, I'm going to go with the Steelers. I think they rebound after that loss. And, the offense is great and everything like that, I think. But overall, I think we're going to have a better effort from the pass rush. They've been kind of absent over the last few weeks. So having potentially Alex Highsmith back, having TJ Watt in there as well, and Nick Herbig playing the way that he is, I'm assuming and I'm anticipating a close game. But overall, I think the Steelers are going to get it done on the road and go up to 9-3. Then we go to the other side of things. We have the Colts playing the New England Patriots, two of the youngest quarterbacks in the NFL, Anthony Richardson and Drake May, both at 22 years old, and both of them coming off of pretty big losses to Miami and to the Detroit Lions, respectively. And you could argue that, Drake May, looking at how the Patriots have handled him and everything like that, how Drake May has looked better than Anthony Richardson already, just depending on, how the Patriots have handled Drake May as opposed of how the Colts have handled Anthony Richardson and things like that. But I think Indianapolis just has more talent in this game overall, and they're 1 year further along than where the Patriots are, right? The Colts brought in their rookie last year, and they've had more development from Josh Downs, and they've had Jonathan Taylor, playing well, and Michael Pittman kind of stepping into another role as a legit number one wide receiver and things like that. Their defense has gone better. They have more playmakers on that side of the ball. So there's still no doubt that both teams are figuring things out as we go, but I'm going to go with the Colts. I feel like they're going to rebound from the game last week against the Lions and get one over here on the Patriots to kind of keep their playoff hopes alive mathematically. So we're going to go with the Colts in this one. Then the last two games here, we have the Chargers going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Both of these teams are trending in opposite directions. I think the Chargers, more often than not, are, stacking up wins. They're going through a period where they're playing some of their best football. And not to say that the Falcons are kind of just falling apart or anything like that, but they're coming off of two pretty bad losses against the Saints and just getting beat up by the Denver Broncos. So, you have your ebbs and flows, obviously, in the season, but these teams are meeting, in different places. The Chargers have won 4 of their last 5 games, and the Chargers defense kind of got punked last week against the Baltimore Ravens. You have a lot of people talking about how they're not that good, they're frauds and everything like that, and now they face another tough and talented offense with the Falcons. Definitely the best part of their team with Kirk, with Bijan. Drake London's playing great. Darnell Mooney is playing insane as well. And by that same kind of idea, Atlanta, faces another tough defense. The Chargers, I still have confidence in them. And with guys like Derwin James, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, they're going to have their hands full as well. They're one of the best teams against the run as well. Not so much shown last week, but still in general. So with that in mind, I think the Chargers defense has an opportunity to kind of prove themselves again and, stake their claim as one of the best defenses in the NFL. So by that, I'm going to go with the Chargers. I have a feeling that they're going to get after Kirk Cousins, and also the Falcons defense isn't that good compared to the Ravens defense. There's a bit of a margin there, and they don't really get to the quarterback a lot. So when you give Justin Herbert that much time to pass, I think it obviously plays more in the Chargers' favor. So I'm going to go with the Chargers to win here on the road. And then just lastly here, we have a Seattle Seahawks team that couldn't be more focused and more locked in. And we couldn't have the farthest example of that in the New York Jets, right? The Jets, they're surrounded by news about the general manager, the quarterback wanting to play there, not wanting to play there, and just still a not good record as well. So they have a lot of things to kind of talk about and other people talk about other than their football. And the Seahawks have come off of their bye. They defeated the 49ers in an impressive win, and then they just defeated the Arizona Cardinals as well at home to go to first place in their division. So they're very much locked in here and focusing in on everything. So because of that, and the Seahawks have a 3-1 record on the road, I feel like that they have to win this game with all the pressure that's on them from the 49ers, from the Rams, and even from the Arizona Cardinals. Give me the Seahawks to win this game and go to a 3-game winning streak other than just 2. So that's only the first half of the games that we're going to go through this upcoming weekend. We're going to go to a quick break, and we're going to get to part 2 of the rest of the games coming up on Sunday. Jumping back into the action now here for our last segment on today's show, just going through part 2 of the game picks that we have coming up on Sunday. We got through part 1 already, talking about the first half of it, but because we are recording this show in advance, we can't go through both parts in separate days, so we're going to talk about part 2 now and getting to our picks for the other half of the games here. So looking at the other games now that we have on Sunday, starting off with the Houston Texans and the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's the second game between both of these AFC North rivals. The first game, it was only 24-20, but they had Trevor Lawrence playing. Now with Trevor Lawrence looking like he's going to miss the rest of the year with that shoulder injury and all the comments about whether or not they're going to move on from Doug Peterson and things like that, and just things not looking great right now for the Jaguars on top of their bad record as well. you know, it is leaning more towards the Texans. But in the same breath, the Texans are showing some signs of slippage, right? We had last week against the Titans where they probably should have won that game. Even in this game as well, it took a last-second touchdown by C.J. Stroud to win this game overall. So there is a little bit of like I don't really know there, but the Jaguars are also coming off of their bye, but they lost 52-6 to Detroit before that. So even still, with the Texans still figuring things out, I'm still going to go with Houston. Houston have an opportunity here to get back on track against one of the worst run defenses in the NFL as well. So after Mixon had a down performance, I'm going to go and bank on him to rebound off of that. So I'm going to go with the Texans in this game. Then just going down one more row, we have the Arizona Cardinals against the Minnesota Vikings. A very interesting game here because the Cardinals are technically battling with the Vikings for a wild card spot, even though the Vikings have a lot better record than they do. It would definitely help in the Cardinals' chase to get into the wild card, but Arizona's coming off of a very disappointing performance last week against Seattle, only putting up 6 points, and they lost the first place spot in the division, but also not only did they drop out of that spot, but they dropped completely out of the playoffs. They sit at number 8 right now as things stand. So it is a spot where there has to be the maximum amount of urgency showed because of that fact. You don't want to just be left out completely, and you're facing a very tough Minnesota defense, and at home they're playing a lot better. They have just been playing better in general. And Minnesota is also coming into this one with a little win streak here, despite a nail-biting win over the Chicago Bears. They just continue to find ways to win. And even though Justin Jefferson, as kind of like an anomaly, not really playing to his standards, they have the talent in TJ Hawkinson, in Jordan Addison, in Aaron Jones, who's has played a bigger role recently, and even Jalen Naylor scoring a couple touchdowns. They have a lot of talent to just still play great, despite the fact that everyone's focusing on Justin Jefferson. And with all of that being said, I know Arizona's going to play better. I expect them to play better. But it's against another tough defense. They're very good against the run, and the Cardinals just really struggled running at all against the Seattle Seahawks. And I think that the Vikings have a better run defense than they do. So I think it's going to be too much to ask for from Arizona. I feel like they're going to have around the same success in the running game, and the offense just for Minnesota, unless Sam Darnold just drops an absolute awful performance, I think they just have too much to deal with. They could focus on Justin Jefferson all they want, and they're going to have to double team him. Jordan Addison's playing great. TJ Hawkinson's owning the middle of the field, and Aaron Jones is playing very well. So give me the Minnesota Vikings. I think it's just going to be too much for the Arizona Cardinals. And then we go to one more game down on the left-hand side, and we have the Titans playing against the Washington Commanders. And I think this is a very misleading game because you look at how the Commanders lost last week, right? Very miraculous, very just unlikely for a game to ever end like that, but it did, and they ended up on the wrong end of it. And then you look at the Tennessee Titans coming in with a 3-8 record, not really much to play for, but they just defeated the Houston Texans on the road as well. And Washington just look a little bit like tired, or it just feels like the long season is playing a toll on them, especially Jaden Daniels, who is currently in the longest season, I'm sure, of his entire football career, without really having a break with the draft and the combine and everything like that. I think it's starting to show a little bit here, and the offense really hasn't looked that efficient overall. And Tennessee's defense is also number 5 or 6 in terms of passing yards allowed, and number 8 in rushing yards allowed as well. Their defense is pretty underrated. We saw it last week when they completely just neglected and just negated, actually I should say, Joe Mixon from the game. He only had 22 rushing yards, and the running game is a big part of the Commanders' offense to keep things in motion, to keep things in a fluid, sort of rhythm. So because of that, I think I'm going to go with the Titans here. They also have not really too much to play for also, so the Commanders, I'm sure, are starting to feel a little bit tight about, like, all right, we've dropped a couple games here. We got to start winning these games, right? And it's a new year, new era with, Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels obviously coming in there. They want to be in the playoffs and they want to prove all these people wrong, but I'm sure they're starting to feel a little bit of that pressure, and I'm not quite sure that they're ready to kind of respond. So I'm going to go with the Titans here, surprising everyone yet again and winning on the road against the Washington Commanders. And now it allows us to move to the other side of things, right? We have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the Carolina Panthers. Another tricky game as well because you look at the Buccaneers here, and it is a little bit just misleading, a little bit just because the Bucs are in a spot where, they have to win most of their games. They have to win the rest of their games, right, to get in the playoffs, but they've also dropped a couple, so it is a tough spot to be in, but they are still fighting for that spot, and it's the first meeting between both of these two teams, and Carolina showed a little bit of something last week against Kansas City. Bryce Young is looking to be playing a lot better for overcoming, being benched and everything like that, especially after a rough first year. So even despite all of that, I thought Tampa Bay, despite playing the Giants also, it felt like they looked rejuvenated. And with Mike Evans coming back also and Baker Mayfield playing at a good level, I'm going to go with the Bucs. I think maybe the Carolina Panthers keep it close for a little bit, but still, I'm going to go with the Buccaneers to win on the road. Then you get another game that's pretty misleading as well, with the Rams traveling to New Orleans to take on the Saints. The Saints are 2-0 currently under their new head coach, Darren Rizzi, and they've played a lot better at home this year as well. So the Rams are coming in desperate to win because they have a tough slate of games coming up in their division, obviously, but also against Buffalo that I feel like would favor Buffalo because, just the way the Bills are playing right now, they're on a different level than I think most teams. So this is a game that the Rams need to win if they want to have any true shot at making the playoffs. So they need this win, and I feel like despite my sort of doubts a little bit, I feel like they should have enough on both sides to win this game overall and just kind of outscore the Saints, if anything, on the road here. So give me the Rams in this game. I'm going to go with them to keep pace in that playoff race. And then lastly, you want to talk about misleading. This game should be a top tier, level of game right up there with Philadelphia and the Ravens this week, but I don't really think it's going to be that close. I've been really disappointed with San Francisco this year. Even when they're healthy, I think there's something just like missing, or there's something wrong with this team overall. Of course, Christian McCaffrey's come back, but it's not really fair, in my opinion, to expect him to just jump in into mid-season form. So there's a little bit of that. Christian's still trying to get back into it, but there's the injury to Brandon Ayuk, which obviously has taken a bigger toll on them than originally expected. So it's been pretty disappointing from the 49ers. I believe they're 5-6 right now. And, you look at the Bills also on the other side. They're playing like one of the best teams in the NFL. And the fact that this game's in Buffalo, the Bills have not lost yet at Buffalo. They're 5-0, while the 49ers are 2-3 on the road. And on top of that, the 49ers have not even beaten a team over 500 until this point. And I don't think that's going to change going into Sunday. Give me the Buffalo Bills. They're probably going to win by at least, I would say, 10 points or 2 touchdowns at least. I think that's how much of a difference there is right now, unfortunately, between these two teams. And it's going to take a big, effort from the 49ers to even be close in this game. So I think it's just too much stacked against them. So I'm going to go with the Bills. And with that being said, that does it for today's episode of the Chip Shot Football Podcast. Thank you guys for listening to today's show. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. Make sure to check out both YouTube channels as well, the GSMC Podcast Network channel and the GSMC Sports Network channel, for more content around the Chip Shot Football Podcast. And also, don't forget to join each and every live show each weekday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time for more coverage on the NFL, breaking news, stories, breakdowns, everything that there is to know about the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving, and I'll see you guys back here next week on Monday.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go